You have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Friday edition of Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman, here with Tom Orr and Shannon Sommers. Shannon, how are you doing on this awesome, wet Friday?
I'm doing great. I'm going to be on my way to Progressive Field for the Indians home opener. And then I think for a comedy show tonight, we'll watch the Michigan show.
Michigan show on Amazon. What's the name of that one? What's it called? What's the title?
All or Nothing.
All or Nothing. It. That was Tom Orr. Thank you, Tom, for that dynamite drop in. Now, Shannon, what are you most excited about the baseball game? Now, tell us.
There's this burger, or it's like with smoked pulled pork or whatever, and was it the Flaming Hot Cheetos and some other stuff? And that's, I'm going to give a review of this sandwich because that. Oh, and the Ohio State University marching band, I guess their spring band is going to be at a Progressive Field, help celebrate the opening day for Ohio or for the Indians.
Also known as the most flaming hot band in the land.
Not bad. That's not bad. I've never had Flaming Hot Cheeto. I imagine that I can picture in my mind what it would taste like, but are they really hot, or is it just like the hot fries, the Andy Cap hot fries? Is that all they are?
To be honest with you, I've never had the Flaming Hot. I've had the jalapeno and cheddar, which I really, really like. So I've never really went to the Flaming Hot. Don't know why.
They can't actually ever sell anything that's really hot. It's like,
right.
I've never had Flaming Hot Cheetos, but they are not. They basically can't sell anything that's actually hot. It's like when Wendy's had ghost pepper fries or burgers or whatever it was. If you eat an actual ghost pepper, your face melts off your body, Raiders of the Lost Ark style. And those were like, this is basically like a jalapeno with a little more heat. That was it. So whenever anyone actually, says oh, this is hot, it's always like, yeah, but no, it's really not.
That's part of the fun of traveling with our photographers, Jim Davidson and Dan Harker. They are pepper fiends. And so whenever we go to places, especially when we go to a Mexican place, they'll be like, give us your hottest salsa. And they're like, okay. And they're like, no, get us your hottest salsa. They're very, it's militant. It's sort of like when the Parks and Rec, when Ron Swanson orders all of the eggs and bacon in the restaurant, and he stops and he's like, no, what you think you may have heard is, give me a lot of eggs and bacon, but what I want is all of your eggs and bacon. And that's how they are with their peppers. Dan grows the Carolina Reapers or the one below that between the ghost pepper and that. And they're maniacs, and they'll put red pepper flakes on everything, in the water. Who knows? I'm good at just jalapenos. We'll get pizza with jalapenos on it. That's good for me. I put jalapenos wherever I can. I don't need to go beyond that. I don't need to go further than that. Tom, are you a pepper person?
I am a pepper person. My wife constantly looks at me and wonders why I order the hot food that I do. Because she's not a hot food person at all. So she makes fun of me for ordering hot food, and I felt like I was, I ate a lot of spicy food, and then I started traveling with Dan and Jim, and it was like, oh no, okay, no, I eat. What I'm eating is the mild salsa of hot foods.
Now, you guys tell me if this makes me a bad husband. When we'll get pizza, and if I don't want anybody else in the house to eat the pizza that I'm getting, I'll get jalapenos on it so that I know there'll be some left over for breakfast and things like that. That doesn't make me a bad person, right?
I mean, that isn't what makes you a bad husband necessarily, but that doesn't mean...
Good. That's all I needed. We don't need to go on. Let's go ahead and start the show. What a great tagline. That doesn't make you a bad husband. Let's start the show. Gosh, where do we leave you guys last? The offensive line we talked about on Wednesday. There's a bunch of other stuff we didn't get to. Urban was asked on Monday if there's, a concern about the lack of leadership because you lose JT Barrett, who's been your leader since 2014, basically. And now he's gone, so you have to fill that leadership elsewhere. But he does have Harris Campbell and Terry McLaurin, who were both captains last year. And so there aren't captains right now, but there are leaders there. He said there is a void without JT, but he expects that to be closed by the end of spring camp. And Tom, is that do you think that's realistic to sort of not just be moved on from JT in terms of the offense, but that they can fill this leadership void and that players will step up and assume his role as this larger than life football leader?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's outrageous to think that those positions are going to get filled. I mean, I think it makes sense that he's not that worried about it right now, because if you think about it, quarterback is one of the positions that is traditionally like a leadership position. Center is one of those positions that's sort of a leadership position on the offensive line. Middle linebacker is one of the positions that's, traditionally one of the leadership positions on the defense. Those are all spots where they don't have an established starter yet. Once you have an established starting quarterback, whether it's Haskins or Burrow or Martell, whoever comes out of spring, assuming they come out of spring saying, this is going to be the guy, then that guy immediately is going to become a team leader. We've seen a little bit of Burrow and a little bit of Haskins already sort of assuming that role when they're in that position of being the quarterback. So I don't think there's going to be a big concern with one of them being able to step up and take that, assume that leadership role. And, Brady Taylor at center, if it, assuming it's him, it sounds like it's going to be him. Assuming it's him, here's a fifth-year guy, been in the program forever, very solid, upstanding citizen by all accounts. He's the kind of guy who can be a locker room leader. I don't think that there's, and Baron Browning and the middle linebacker, just the third position I mentioned earlier, assuming it's Baron Browning, Urban Meyer is already, talking about him and, the fact that he's a future captain. So I don't think that there's really any reason to be concerned. I think it's more of a function of where they sort of have unfilled holes right now, also being sort of traditional leadership positions.
Meyer also mentioned Jordan Fuller as a leader back there. And you mentioned, I don't know, a couple months ago, I think we were talking about possible young captains, and you were right away talking about Baron Browning based on the way, sort of the reverence that the coaches talk about him with. It would be interesting to see him sort of come out of spring as one of those leaders and almost out of nowhere, because I remember Raekwon McMillan, when he was starting as a sophomore, he wasn't a captain, but he always, when we talked to him as a junior, when he was a captain, I believe, he was like, well, I was a leader last year too. You have to be a leader as the middle linebacker. You're the quarterback of the defense, and you may not be captain, but you are the defensive leader out there. So it's, he could be one of those guys that emerges as well. I thought it was interesting that Isaiah Prince, or not Isaiah Prince, but rather Malcolm Pridgeon mentioned that, talking about the quarterback battle, that they're all playing well, and that they were trying to fall back on, quote unquote, fall back on JT's leadership style. And that got me wondering if maybe they're trying to be what the coaches think they want rather than who they are. And I think if you're not a true leader, that eventually will come out, especially in a battle like this. But Shannon, I'll ask you: do you think that are they maybe trying to be something that they're not, trying to be what the coaches think they should be, or what they think the coaches want them to be, rather than simply being who they are? Is that a possibility, or are they, as a quarterback, aren't you just naturally a leader?
No, I think there's a natural leadership to them, but at the same time, there's very good possibility that trying to be something that they're not, because they've watched how JT is with the team and how much he's praised for his leadership for the last 3 years, and the only 3-time captain ever at the Ohio State University. So I'm sure there's a lot of that, trying to emulate him as far as, well, if he did it, this is the way he did it, this is the way we have to do it.
Well, and we've talked before about how last year it was, or the year before, or before Joe Burrow got injured, he was always right next to JT, and they were both really excitable in all the videos, and they were leading the team. And I think that's where Joe Burrow got his vision of leadership from, and then he made it his own. Larry Johnson has talked about he wants his players to watch Nick Bosa to see how you're supposed to practice. I think the same could hold true for, this is how you're supposed to lead. Now then they just have to sort of figure out how that works for them and what kind of leaders they are. And when it comes down to winning that quarterback battle, I think we all agree that leadership is going to be, I don't know if it's the decider, but the winner will not, you're not going to win the job without being the leader of the offense. But I still, like we talked on last show, I think the decider is who moves the ball best. And if he's not a captain, I think they're okay with that, because they, there's, I don't know, Tom, would they be okay with that? That if the starter isn't a captain? Kenny Guyton was a captain as a backup. Braxton Miller was a captain at the same time. But does the starting quarterback need to be a captain?
I think the starting quarterback is almost by default going to be a captain. I think as a quarterback, all three of those guys, they may not be JT Barrett style leaders. Maybe they're leaders in a different way. Maybe they're not as vocal in the locker room, or they're, more the lead by example type, or whatever it is. You're going to be a leader by default. In high school, I'm sure Dwayne Haskins, as the starting quarterback in his high school in Maryland, was a leader. I'm sure Tate Martell was a leader for Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. Joe Burrow was a leader for his high school in Athens. I mean, as the starting quarterback, as the star quarterback, you are not someone who can just sort of sit in the shadows and let someone else be the face of the program. You are, whether you want to or not, you are the face of the program. You are the leader. So, and you're the one that people are turning to and looking to. So these guys have all done this before. This is not like this is some foreign concept to any of them. So maybe they're not leading in exactly the way that JT Barrett did, or maybe they are. But whoever it is, I think, is almost by default going to become a team leader. They're going to be one of those people that we talk to every week on Mondays or Wednesdays, whenever it is we talk to players during the season. And they're going to come out and they're going to talk after every game, to the media after the game. And so you become sort of the public face of the program. And then you're also sort of, you're the guy who's running the show on half of the team. So you're the team, when you're in the huddle, the whole team is literally looking to you to hear what to do. So I think you become a leader by being the starting quarterback, whether you start, whether you're that way right now or not. That is how it will turn out.
Connor Cook disagrees with you.
Well, and that's the one of the things I wanted to touch on, because I see no question Joe Burrow would be a captain if he wins the job. I don't know that Dwayne Haskins would receive the votes, but you wonder if the players would vote based on, well, he's my quarterback, so he's my captain, so I'm going to put his name in there. And then even if the votes aren't there, it's such an annoying topic to have to, Dwayne, you're the starter, but you didn't get the captain votes. I mean, how do you feel about that? And it's just going to be, it'll be just continue to be brought up like it was with Connor Cook. And it would have been so much easier for Mark D'Antonio I think they had three captains that year, and he just wouldn't go to 4 and bring in Connor Cook or whatever. I think he should have, just to avoided that whole controversy, but
that was weird. That wasn't weird because he was a starting quarterback and he wasn't the captain. That was the weird because it was like his second or third year as a starting quarterback and he wasn't the captain. Like that was, the first year as a starter, it's not necessarily weird if you're not the captain. And if it's Martell this year, if Martell happens to be the starter, I don't know if you're going to have a redshirt freshman as a captain. I mean, they did with JT Barrett, right? He was a captain in 2014, right?
Correct.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it wouldn't be unprecedented for a redshirt freshman.
No,
he wasn't.
15.
No.
Okay. So, yeah. Right. So Martell, I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be if it is Martell, but if it's Haskins, it's your third year in the program. If it's Burrow, it's your fourth year in the program. You're the starting quarterback. I mean, Urban Meyer has, he's basically come out and said this, right? Or that the team has a vote, but, sometimes he can kind of put his thumb on the scale if he wants to, if there's a certain guy he wants to get in there. I have a feeling that one way or the other, if it's a veteran starting quarterback, that's going to be someone that ends up as a captain.
Yeah, Connor Cook was going into his third year as a starter without being named captain, so it's different. But I also see the players sort of like, all right, you guys vote for 6 guys, so they'll vote for 5, and then it's vote for the starting quarterback as the 6th. But I don't think it's the end all, or it's a huge story if Dwayne Haskins isn't voted a captain as a redshirt sophomore. But I think people will try to make it a bigger story than it is. Like you said, the first year starting, what have you proven to earn these votes? Whereas all of these other starters, Jamarco Jones wasn't ever a captain, and he proved himself way more than any of these quarterbacks have. So people who know this is a made-up topic that we just had, people need to chill in terms of quarterback being the captain. Where are we now, Tom? Lost. No,
Isaiah, about Isaiah Prince. Yes, that was your next. That was your next topic.
So I didn't realize this when he was talking about it, but he's moving to left tackle from right tackle. He played right tackle throughout high school as well. So this will be his first time as a left tackle, and so obviously there's going to be some Buckeye fans who are concerned. And I'll ask one right now. I'll turn to a Buckeye fan right now, Shannon. Do you remember that 2016 Penn State game?
I can't obviously remember games from last year correctly, so you want me to go back to the game where he wasn't given any help and kept getting beat?
Yes, that one. Does it concern you that he is now going to go, after being very good last year, third team All Big Ten, now he's playing a position that it's offensive tackle, so he's played it, but he's never played left tackle before. Does that concern you, given that he was in a good place, and now maybe he might be getting put into a bad place?
I have a slight reservation and concern about it, but based on what he did last year and the improvements he made, because, you take the Penn State game and he would be honorable mention should be on the bench as far as right tackles. And then last year he goes and makes third team for All Big Ten. It's just the big, huge improvement that he made and how hard he worked that I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because of what he did last year and his work ethic and everything, that he is going to be a very solid and a very good left tackle.
I think what also helps him is he is a leader now. He's a senior. So he should be more well-equipped to handle this. But he also is more well-equipped to handle responsibility that is put on him. He's a leader. Brady Taylor was saying that even though he's older than Isaiah Prince is still giving him tips and helping him out. I don't know, Tom, I don't see any reason for it? I mean, there's always reason for concern, but I think he'll be fine. How do you see him as a left tackle? How do you think he'll do?
I don't see any reason for people to be losing sleep over this at this point. I mean, left tackle is not necessarily harder than right tackle. Left tackle is just a little more, it's more of a higher stakes thing than right tackle because it's the blind side of the quarterback if it's a right-handed quarterback. So it's not like it's a much more difficult position to learn. So moving from right tackle to left tackle is more of an issue of just, you've got to do things backwards. So, you got in your stance one way with your right foot set back a little bit and, your left foot forward. Well, now you got to reverse your feet. So now your right foot's a little forward and your left foot's a little back. I mean, it's not like you're, learning a whole new position. It's the same position. It's the same basic responsibilities. You're just doing everything backwards, which is just, I mean, that should just be a repetition thing. It's not like he's going to forget where he's playing when he's, in the middle of the season this year. I don't think that's a big concern. He made such a leap last year from, his sophomore year when it was just, went from like okay to really not good depending on the game. And last year it went from pretty good to very good, I think, pretty consistently. Like he was just, it was a story that he was never a story last year. Because there were games when he was a story in 2016, not a good one. And he last year was just kind of, partway through the year, we kind of looked at each other like, oh yeah, he's just, we haven't really talked about him. He's, I guess he's been doing a good job, basically.
He's boring.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it's like long snappers. If you never notice the long snapper's doing a really good job. If your tackle's doing a good job, I mean, you don't generally have offensive linemen getting famous unless they're Orlando Pace. So, he's not Orlando Pace. Let's set the expectation right there. But if you can just keep your guy off of the quarterback, if you're not the guy who's picking the quarterback up in the pocket after he's gotten drilled because your man hit him, you're probably doing fine. He doesn't need to be Orlando Pace this year. He needs to be, if he's Jamarco Jones this year, if he can just play at that level and maybe be a first team or second team all conference player, they can have a very good year if they get that out of him at left tackle.
He's bigger than Jamarco. Isaiah's 6'7". He could, if he has the same kind of year as DeMarco, he could be a first-round pick. I mean, heck, Mike Adams was a first-rounder, wasn't he? First or second, maybe?
So. I think he went to the Steelers. I think so.
Right.
So it was probably late first round. The question I have about Prince is, okay, did you have a left-handed quarterback where you were the right tackle and therefore you were protecting the blind side? Or who the heck was the left tackle on his high school football team if Isaiah Prince, who is one of the top 100 players in the country, was not the left tackle?
Well, and they could have just been a running team, and that's their power side, and maybe that's why.
That could be.
But, you talked about the ease of moving. I mean, it's sort of like a mirror image. And Tom, right now, try to write your name left-handed. It's not that easy.
I'm actually a lefty, so it's actually very easy for me. My handwriting still looks like a first grader's, but it's very easy for me to do it.
Well, nobody likes to show off, Tom. I wanted to move to Kevin Wilson now because maybe I'm the only one reading into this. Not all of the questions, a bunch of the questions he had when we talked to him on Wednesday of last week were about, how did you think you did? Do you feel like you've been demoted? Is your ego hurt from Ryan Day getting a promotion? All of this, like, sort of insinuation that the offense was not one of the best in school history last year. I guess I sort of take offense to all of that entire line of thought from everybody, and so maybe I'm just projecting it out there when I don't think I was with Wilson last week, so I'm just reading the transcript of the question, and it's like the offense was really great last year, and obviously they weren't great when at certain times. But Tom, did you Did you get that feel that there's sort of this underlying, like, why weren't you as good as you should have been, or sort of this criticism without criticism?
I was the person who was there with Wilson during that interview, and I didn't really notice that at the time. And I saw this question in the rundown. I went back and read the transcript, and it's like, yeah, I can kind of see that. I think it just kind of comes with the territory, where if someone else, if you have a job and someone else that you work with gets a promotion and now they also have that job, it sort of looks like, by comparison, you got a demotion, or maybe you didn't do a great job and now someone else is coming in to help you do your job. I think it's more of just a function of that. And, I mean, we've kind of heard from a number of people that that's just sort of a paperwork thing, and just we have to give him a shiny new title so we can give him his shiny new paycheck and his shiny new 3-year contract. So, it's not necessarily a reflection of the fact that Kevin Wilson did a bad job, but from the outside, it kind of looks like that. I mean, Kevin Wilson said during that interview that his daughter heard that Ryan Day was getting promoted to offensive coordinator, and she called him all upset, like, "Did you get fired? What happened?" So, I mean, so from the outside, it is going to look like that. So I think that was sort of the nexus of a lot of those questions. The offense was good last year. I looked it up. They were 7th in S&P Plus last year on offense. They were 8th in S&P Plus on defense. So, it was basically the same. And I don't think that the defensive coaches were above reproach last year. They had a couple games where they didn't look great. They had some issues against Oklahoma. Obviously had some unpleasantness in Iowa City as well. And the offense kind of, again, that Oklahoma game, that offense didn't do a whole heck of a lot. And, then even the Cotton Bowl was kind of, it was fine. And they just sort of sat on the lead and didn't do much. They just kind of did the fat kid sitting on you and not letting you get up for the second half of that game. But, there were games where it was kind of like, yeah, it was all right. And, they absolutely lit people on fire when they played bad teams, which is, what you're supposed to do, and what Urban Meyer has very consistently done at Ohio State. But, I don't think the defensive coaches are, totally above reproach after last year. So I don't think it would be outrageous if people were questioning the offense a little bit. This is Ohio State. The expectations are completely unrealistic, which is why your paycheck is, ludicrously big as well. It just comes with the territory.
And I think we all expect, and it's crazy to say, but like now with JT Barrett gone, maybe the offense won't be so hampered, which might be the stupidest thing ever said, but might also have like a whole bunch of truth to it. Shannon, are you? Is that a stupid statement? Is that something that is probably accurate?
I'm really not sure, to be honest with you.
I think I don't think you're alone, because that's sort of what this season is about, is finding out which side that's on. But I don't think there's any doubt, Tom, the offense was held back at times by JT Barrett, be it the Iowa game, or just, he had the best season arguably for an Ohio State quarterback ever, but this might have been the best offensive staff Ohio State has ever had, and maybe it should have been better. But I think he held them back at times. Obviously, we can't ignore all of the positives, but I think the potential is there for, you can't say a much better offense, but a more, a much better offense, Tom, against better defenses. How about that?
I think that's realistic. I mean, it's kind of a trick question where, yes, I think it is both kind of stupid to say that they will get better without the guy who basically holds every record in the Ohio State record book. So it's kind of a stupid statement, but it's also kind of true. Where,
thank you.
With the, I mean, you said it was one of the dumbest things ever said, and it's like, that's not even the dumbest thing you've said in this podcast. Come on, that's not that dumb. JT Barrett had one of the most dynamic and explosive careers of any player in Big Ten history, but he also had certain limitations that, they would sort of bump up against that kind of glass ceiling in some circumstances, because there were some things he couldn't do. And after 4 years of starting, everyone knew what those were. Defenses could try and force them into those situations. And when you ran up against a team that was talented enough that they couldn't just, outman them just with just sheer waves of 4 and 5 star players, when that wasn't enough, when you were playing kind of comparably talented teams, a lot of times those limitations that he had were things that other teams could force Ohio State into, and you'd get some kind of ugly looking results. And now there's, you're going to have Dwayne Haskins or Joe Burrow is not going to be perfect. They are also going to have their limitations, but it'll probably take people a little while to figure out what those are. And Ohio State fans probably just got tired of watching the same thing and watching kind of the same issues. It's ridiculous to say that you're sick of watching this team put up 40 whatever it is points a game and 550 or 600 yards of offense a game, because it's just this again. But I think people were probably just ready for something else. Let's have some new problems. We're tired of watching the same problems. Let's have some new problems with someone new, basically.
Right. Let's throw some kiwi into the hairy buffalo.
Back to the hairy buffalo again.
I'm really thirsty, and I guess I haven't had a drink in a long time. So,
are we making this in the Tennessee trash can?
Probably the best use you could have for that thing. Both Wilson and Day have talked about this is the offense isn't changing, but you work to the personnel that you have, you work to the strengths of the quarterbacks, and each of these 3 quarterbacks have different strengths. We don't need to talk too much about the quarterbacks because we did it in the last show. One of the things he said is that there's always going to be reads for the quarterback, and we've talked about that before. Like, you're never going to get rid of the quarterback run. It's always going to be part of the offense. It may not be as much of a part because it doesn't suit Dwayne Haskins. It might suit Joe Burrow. Definitely suits Tate Martell. But you're not going to try to fit guys to what they can't do. And that's one of the things that Jim Tressel always did. He didn't have an offensive system per se, because when he had Terrell Pryor, they were a spread offense. And 2006, they were a spread offense. They still run some I formation and stuff, but think of that Michigan game, how many times they had 5 wides out there. That's not 2004 when you have Brandon Joe, running the ball because he's your best running back option. I mean, so you work with what you've got, and these 3 guys are different, but there's enough there to work with. I think people get so hung up on all of the carries that JT had that they just, like you said, Tom, they want something new. But I think reads are still really difficult to defend as long as you're not just doing the whole reading the defensive end and do I hand it off or keep it. They're doing some different things. They'll do the run pass option. They'll do some of the zone read because you have to. And Tom, there's no reason to get rid of it, or even to sort of make it not as much part of the offense, even with Dwayne Haskins. And I don't really have a question for you, but if you have anything else you wanted to add about the fact that the reading's not going anywhere, some people may want it to go somewhere, and they may get frustrated by what they see if they see it coming back, but it's always going to be here.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be here. This is part and parcel with having Urban Meyer as your football coach. Urban Meyer's offense has been read-based for as long as there has been an Urban Meyer offense, basically. And he's pretty much obsessed with the numerical advantage that it gives you. Basically, you're forcing the defense to make a choice, and you can force them to, no matter what they do, always make the wrong choice if you read it correctly, basically. Now, you can do that with the zone read that we've seen time and time again for the last, 5-6 years. But you can also do that in the pass game. You can do it as a handoff, or if you read it, if you get a different look, you, instead of handing it off, you throw it. It can be a different look. It doesn't have to just be the JT Barrett hands it to Mike Weber or JT Barrett runs with it. You can have other different reads and different ways to utilize those same principles and get that numerical advantage that Urban Meyer wants to get, but not have it look exactly the same way. And that's what you're going to see this year. You're going to see, we've seen that some in previous years. I think people don't necessarily always recognize it for what it is when they're running those types of plays, but you're going to, I think, see more of that and more different ways to utilize that same basic idea.
I also think the short yardage JT stuff was some of the most effective runs because it gives you that numbers advantage that they want that you mentioned. But it's funny because that's also what people are sort of, Buckeye fans are so sick of seeing, is just JT every time on 3rd and short, 4th and short. And I think we talked about it last week. Dwayne Haskins has said, he knows that may be him and he's ready for that. Joe Burrow is obviously ready for that. Tate Martell on 4th and 1, he may go 60 yards and have to apologize for it later, but I think he's ready for that. But I also think people would rather just be like, why can't JK carry it more? Why can't Mike Weber carry it more? And I do think we'll see that. Defensively, I've been interested to see how this whole Greg Schiano thing works in practice with, having no home, basically, being able to go from spot to spot. So we talked to him last week, and he talked about how he sets his practice schedule up. He's not just he's not Shannon's hobo. He doesn't just go from place to place. He plans things out like, I don't know, maybe a millennial hobo. He's got his phone and I've got to be here at this time and I've got to be here. But I think it'd be pretty interesting to see like his, what kind of sheet he has. Like, because he talked about, if linebackers are working on something and there's one linebacker position that doesn't necessarily need to work on that and they can work on something else, he can grab those guys out. So you've got all of these periods of practice and what everybody's doing, and he can just pick out, at this period, for the first half of this period, I'm going to grab this guy and we're going to work on this. And when Larry Johnson is working with defensive tackles, I'm going to take the defensive ends and work on this one specific drill. And I think it's where we'll probably see the most impact, or where we think we'll see the most impact is linebackers. And if they do play better this year, which we assume they will, maybe we'll give too much credit to Greg Schiano and not give any credit to Billy Davis, who we'll finally talk to again on Wednesday. I mean, who we already just talked to 2 days ago when you're listening to this. I don't want to get into what he said just yet. We'll save that for next week's show because we've already got too much for this week's show. But trust me, there's a lot of interesting stuff. Tom, just one quick tidbit. What was the most interesting thing that you got from Billy Davis this week?
I thought it was mean that the name that he called you after you asked him about the kicking game. I don't coach punters, dope. But that was mean of him to say. But it was a stupid question. In fairness,
it was also fair of him to say. And I thought he was a special teams guy too. That was. Thank you, Tom, for pointing that out. I'm never coming back to you again. A couple of the players that Urban mentioned who have been standing out this spring: nose tackle Davon Hamilton, tight end Luke Farrell. And we talked about Malcolm Pridgeon on the last show. He's another guy that has stepped up. So then I'm thinking, who is going to be the what name does Urban Meyer need to mention next week that he hasn't? In other words, who needs to step up? Because hearing him mention Luke Farrell is huge, in my opinion, because the only other tight end he's talked about since we've seen him this year is probably Jeremy Ruckert, other than saying, Rashad Berry needs to get more consistent a long time ago. I don't think his name has come up. And so to finally hear another tight end mentioned, I think that was big. But, Tom, is there anybody else that sort of needs to have their name mentioned next week to say that, okay, this guy has played well over the last week. He had a good scrimmage.
I think the name that Urban Meyer would most like to be saying that about would be one of the quarterbacks where, then you have some separation then potentially and maybe you get your answer. But I don't anticipate that happening. The thing that I think that we could have is one of the younger wide receivers. He talked this week about the fact that the older guys are not playing very much, and it's been kind of a disaster at times with the younger receivers in there. So, we don't get to see very much practice, so we don't exactly know. Is he looping in Austin Mack and Benjamin Victor in that group, or is he just talking about Jalen Harris and Elijah Gardner and C.J. Saunders and some of those guys? We don't quite know. My assumption is probably all of those guys are included in that conversation. So, it would be good if someone at that X position, whether it's Ben Victor or Austin Mack, if one of those guys kind of really took a step forward and proved himself worthy of the hype that we have been showering upon them for a lot of the spring. Personally, it would be great if Austin Mack took a step forward, because I've been talking about how Austin Mack is ready to take a step forward. So it'd be really helpful if he could do that. So just from a personal level, but from a team level, they need someone at that X position to take a step forward and become a consistent receiving threat. I mean, you don't need to get 1,200 yards out of that guy, but you need to have someone who you can go to 4 or 5 times a game down the field, for 15 yards or so. You don't need to be a home run hitter at the X, but you need to be kind of that good, consistent, solid possession receiver who blocks well. That's what they need there. And it doesn't, sort of reading between the lines, it doesn't sound like they feel like they have that there yet.
Now, I hadn't even thought that he was talking about Victor and Mack, and if he is, I mean, people need to start panicking. Not necessarily, but the fact that those guys should no longer be a concern. But yeah, we were both impressed with Jalen Harris when we saw him early on. Sort of, and now we haven't really heard much about him. I don't know. Sometimes guys get injured, you just don't hear any more about him for a while. But I'm sort of reminded of Austin Mack's freshman year, where he looked really good the first couple weeks of spring and then hit a wall and just went away. And maybe that's happening now to Jalen Harris. I am thinking you would also like to be mentioning another safety, the second starting safety would be another area, be it Isaiah Pryor or Amir Reeb or Wayne Davis, Jocelyn Wynn, any of those guys, because he's already said that Josh Proctor will compete once he arrives. I don't see him taking a starting job, but they will. I mean, he's a tall guy. He's 6'2", 200. He's basically like Jordan Fuller and Isaiah Pryor. He's sort of, I guess, that model that they're looking for. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The positions there, especially quarterback, I think that's maybe the most important one. But he also is concerned about safety. And right now, things are starting to shape up. He was concerned about center. He doesn't really seem to be concerned about that area anymore. There are no starters at linebacker right now. He's not concerned about that. We know he's not worried about defensive line. Even though he doesn't have a starter quarterback, he doesn't seem worried about that yet. He's not thrilled, but I think it's too early to be concerned, but he also likes to have his depth chart sort of basically known by the end of spring. And there's still 6 odd practices remaining. Thinking back to when we talked to the quarterbacks, somebody asked Joe Burrow how important the spring game is in terms of the quarterback battle. And he said he doesn't think it's that important because, it's just one practice out of everything else. But if everything else is still equal at that point, Shannon, the spring game becomes very important, don't you think?
There's probably going to be some importance to it, but you would think by then, after everything that the coaches have seen, they've got to have some kind of idea. I mean, you're not going to be able to do a lot of things in the spring game as it is. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal.
You think it's basically just an exhibition, which is sort of basically what it is. I don't know, Tom, do you think, does the spring game matter this year? Much?
It matters if your assumption is that they need to have a decision on quarterback at the end of spring practice, and they're going into the spring game pretty much even, then I mean, that sort of de facto serves as the tiebreaker, right? Unless they're going to sort of punt that decision to the fall, which, that could in and of itself sort of be a decision. If you tell Joe Burrow that we don't know yet, and he may or may not decide that he wants to stick around and find out how that turns out. So yeah, I mean, I think it is something that fans in general, and probably we in the media as well, overrate, because it's by far the most exposure we get to the team between January and between the end of the Cotton Bowl and the start of the Oregon State game. This is by far going to be the longest extended look that we get at the team in that 9-month span or 8-month span. So it's something that you're kind of naturally going to overrate from the outside because it's kind of your only major data point that you have, because we just don't get to watch very much practice otherwise. But as far as inside the team, it's not going to be a huge thing. It just, like, this year has sort of a unique circumstance where it could end up being a pretty significant thing, at least at that one position. Everywhere else, I don't think it's, think that's something that you can put too much weight on in deciding the starting safety or the starting center or, any of those spots. But quarterback is just sort of a unique situation this year that it could actually be a pretty big deal for that.
And it is just one practice out of 15. But Meyer also talks about he likes it because it gives him a chance to see the players play in front of 80,000, 100,000 people and see how they react. So it is another practice, but it might be the most, I want to say important practice, but it has an importance to it that other practices don't, but other practices have importance to them that the spring game doesn't. I'm reminded of Jim Tressel, as always, but the Jersey scrimmage was always more important than the spring game. The Jersey scrimmage would be the week before, I believe, and the offense and the defense would play for the scarlet jerseys. That was always the more physical. You don't want to lose. You want that scarlet jersey because then you keep it for the entire year. And that was always the more important. If you wanted to see where things stood and you wanted to see players play, that was the scrimmage to watch. It wasn't the spring game, even though that's entertaining as well. But the spring game has that added feature of the crowd. Right now, the weather is in the 60s, possibly some rain showers. Part of the stadium is going to be under construction, so it may not be the atmosphere that Meyer is looking for. But I'm sort of with you guys. Like, if you have to be leaning somewhere at that point. That's just my opinion. Tom, do you think that when Urban Meyer says he doesn't know, he doesn't know?
I think he probably doesn't have an absolute locked in stone answer yet, but I would certainly assume that someone is ahead right now.
Right.
I don't think it's really, gun to his head. He couldn't tell you who's ahead right now. I think he knows someone is in, the one spot and someone is in the 1A spot. And, we don't know who that is. We talked about that a little bit in the last show that, what are the odds that it's one or the other? And it's, 51-49 or 55-45 or whatever it is. But I think he knows. He's not going to say, and he's going to say that they're, neck and neck and they're going back and forth and one guy goes ahead and then the other guy catches up and, he's going to say all those things. But I think deep down, he probably knows which one of them is ahead right now.
I agree. All right, Shannon, let's get to the listener questions and then we can call it a night. Good Friday night.
All right, this one's from Neezy21, at Neezy21. Was last night's Villanova win the biggest win for Ohio State basketball in the past 5 years?
And of course, by last night, you mean Monday night because this is Friday, Shannon.
I'm just reading the question as is. I don't want to change people's questions.
That's when the question was sent. He sent it on Tuesday. So,
I don't think it was the biggest win for Ohio State. I think beating Michigan, a lot of teams have done that. Ohio State did it. They spotted the Wolverines 20 points. I think the Buckeyes had bigger wins this year over Purdue and Michigan State, Tom.
Yeah, you beat the number one team in the country at home. You go on the road. You have a big comeback, dramatic win over what was Purdue 3 at the time or something. Those are both pretty big, pretty significant wins that get a little bit overshadowed because the season kind of petered out a little bit at the end. But those are both very significant wins.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, Shannon, what's the next one?
This is from JK's Jump Cut. Do we have a Michael Jordan or J.K. Dobbins in this year's freshman class? Someone who starts from day one.
Tom, what do you think?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. There's the guys who are in early this year, which are traditionally the guys you think of as being the people who are going to have a chance to do that. Matthew Baldwin, the quarterback, no, he's hurt. You've got Max Ray on the offensive line. He certainly doesn't seem like he's going to grab a starting tackle job. Matthew Jones at center, he's probably not going to grab the starting center job. If you want to count Antoine Jackson, who's a JUCO, that doesn't really count. The only person I think is even really a conversation is Dallas Gant at linebacker. And, maybe, but there's so much depth there that I think I don't see that being really a possibility. You've got good guys coming in at corner in Tyreek Johnson and Sevyn Banks, but they've got great depth at corner. You've got Master Teague at running back, but they've got great depth at running back. Unless there is kind of a wave of injuries, I don't really see that happening. I don't think there's there's one of those impact players that's coming in that is playing at a position where there's likely to be kind of an obvious vacancy, an obvious hole for them to sort of step into.
What about Nick?
Nick Frere?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know how much he's going to play because he needs to get stronger. He needs to add some weight, in my opinion. But they've got Thayer Munford, they've got Brandon Bowen. Both of those guys at right tackle. One of those guys will be good enough to win. Obviously, Isaiah Prince is set. Pettit Frere, could he play inside at this point? I don't think you need it. You don't need him to. You've got. So we don't even talk about Wyatt Davis, and that's a guy who is eventually going to play. And when I'm looking at the early entries or the early enrollees, I don't see anybody, like you said, Tom, at a position of need. Maybe some of the summer enrollees, Josh Proctor, maybe. I don't think so. I'm still an Isaiah Pryor guy. Then there's Jeremy Ruckert, who I don't think it happens because I think he's going to need to become a much better blocker. But he might be the guy I would give the best chance of it happening, and I don't think it'll happen. Not even though we don't know much about where Rashad Berry is. We finally heard Luke Farrell's name mentioned. Jake Hausman we haven't heard from Meyer. So there's room there, but I don't think he's going to be the blocker that they need to be the guy in on running plays. You know how he talks about C.J. Saunders can't play when they're trying to run the ball. Jeremy Ruckert's not going to be able to play when they're trying to run the ball either. Shannon, what's next?
Yeah. Not coming in the spring hurts him a lot. If he was here in the spring, I would absolutely have him in that conversation, probably right at the top of the list. But coming in the summer, probably not being totally physically developed, probably not being totally developed in terms of his game, in terms of blocking. Yeah, I would agree with that.
I bet they're pretty bummed by that fact that he didn't enroll early. You like to have the kids enjoy their senior seasons or whatever, but this would seem to be a missed opportunity for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, this one's from @Mr. Ohio. How often, if ever, do you think we will see both Weber and Dobbins on the field at the same time next year?
I don't know if often is the answer, but it's going to happen. They've talked about it. They've, that was talked to Mike Weber when he was thinking about leaving. I mean, he'll be on the field a lot. J.K. Dobbins is going to be on the field a lot. And so they'll be on the field together at times. And it's in the playbook. I don't know what a good number is. Like, if there's 75 offensive plays for the Buckeyes per game, 15 times a game would seem like a lot to me.
My expectation is set that number right about wherever you have the number for the number of Tate Martell plays. Like, not that they're those right. Guys are going to be on the field with Tate Martell at the same time, but that's probably, I think, a pretty good barometer of like your change up plays. Like, you're going to have, if you have 75 snaps, Martell's in for 5 to 10 of them, maybe. I think 5 to 10-ish is probably a decent guess for Dobbins and Weber as well. It's not going to be the bread and butter standard formation for them, but you're going to see it. You're going to notice it when it's happening, and it's going to make an impact this year. But it's not going to be 20 snaps a game. I think 5 to 10 for Martell and 5 to 10 for the Dobbins Weber package. I think those are both probably decent barometers, like decent over-unders of 8 or something like that for both of those per game.
And it'll be enough times to where defenses have to prepare for it. Now, whether it's more or less depends on how well those guys are at run blocking, how well they run block, how well they're catching passes. So, I mean, there'll be some factors that'll fluctuate, but I think it'll be a part of the offense that defenses have to worry about. What's next?
All right, this one's from Zeke. Garrett Wilson, with Herman in the room, can we reasonably expect to snatch him?
Garrett Wilson is a 4-star wide receiver out of Texas, who is, I believe is the number 3 receiver in Texas now. He's about the number. He's in the top 50 in the nation, I believe.
He's 46th overall, 46. Number 6 wide receiver, and number 7 player in Texas. He goes to the same high school, Lake Travis, the same high school as Matthew Baldwin, who is the quarterback who came into Ohio State in the 2018 class. And
if you want to go ahead and look up Garrett Wilson's highlights on YouTube or Huddle, he's about 6 foot 185. He's quick. He's fast. He's really athletic. He's also a pretty good cornerback. I really like him after the catch. Ohio State doesn't really have a guy like him right now. They might have one in him when Cameron Babb is on campus and healthy. But he moves. He's dynamic. He's from Columbus originally, which also helps the Buckeyes. He's visited. He'll visit again. But I would be surprised if Texas gets him. Now, he's down to Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State, he'll visit officially Ohio State for the spring game. And the week after that, he'll visit Texas for their spring game. And then probably the following week, at some point, he's going to commit. I would be surprised if he doesn't end up a Buckeye. Tom, where are you?
He certainly seems to be trending towards Ohio State. He just visited Ohio State a couple weeks ago, is now coming back again. That's a a pretty good sign. I think the industry consensus is he's trending towards Ohio State. It's always a concern when the other school has that kind of the last visit. I think we saw that maybe with Rasheed Walker, the offensive lineman from Maryland, this last cycle where Ohio State had a visit, left feeling pretty good, and then Penn State had that last visit and ended up getting him. So that's always a little bit of a concern when the other school kind of has last ups, like a baseball game. But I would certainly, if he was, if he's deciding today, I think he's going to Ohio State. Where do you think he would fit on this team? Do you see him playing probably Z, right? I mean, in that,
right?
For people who don't follow the minutia of wide receiver positions, the Z is kind of the like the Terry McLaurin kind of positions where you've got your bigger receivers are the X's. The Benjamin Victors and the Austin Macks. The Z is like the Terry McLaurin, Johnny Dixon kind of that kind of deep threat kind of guy. We're not necessarily like the big jump ball guy, but kind of the more downfield, stretch the field kind of receiver. Is that kind of where you see him?
Yeah, but I could. That's where I expect him to be. But I could also see him being an H like KJ Hill is, or like Philly Brown was, where they're the pass-catching H and they don't carry the ball, but they're really effective over the middle, especially against safeties. And Wilson is a guy who is more dynamic with the football than KJ is. Whereas KJ is a guy who catches the ball and pretty much gets tackled, but he gets first down. Wilson can make some guys miss and then make them pay for it on top of that. I think he'll be a Buckeye. The time frame, though, he's sort of setting his own, like, I need to have my decision afterwards. Like, whereas Rasheed Walker, he sort of had the wall of signing day. So maybe that final visit won't be such a decider, but we'll see.
All right, this one's from SoCal. How many captains this year? Did we learn from last year that more is better or worse, or depends?
I think that's a good question for Urban Meyer when we see him again, maybe. Like, although to ask him about, you have to be careful because we saw last week when you ask him about something in the past, he's like, "Well, we don't have time to keep looking in the past." Even though then in the next question he'll be like, "Well, we've done a 5-year study on this." So I don't know how he would respond to that, but it carries with it a negative connotation. So I would think he would not appreciate the question. I think, was it 8 or 9 captains last year?
I think it was 9. Yeah, 9 last year.
I would expect more like 5 or 6, because last year there were just a lot of veterans, like a lot of fifth-year seniors, and they don't have that many this year. And when he's already talking about true juniors like Jordan Fuller being a leader, who knows? Like we mentioned, Baron Browning on the last show, maybe that's a guy. So there may not be the senior leadership that commands so many captains. I assume we'll see Paris Campbell and Terry McLaurin be captains again. Do they need Johnny Dixon to be a captain? No, but it'll depend on the vote. But Tom, I would expect fewer captains this time around. Don't you?
Probably fewer than 9, but I mean, if you've got McLaurin and Paris Campbell, who are people he signaled out as leaders earlier this week, okay, there's 2. You're going to have someone on the offensive line, probably Isaiah Prince, that's 3. If you make the starting quarterback a captain, that's 4. And then Jordan Fuller, one of the linebackers, whether it's Browning or someone else.
You mentioned Draymond Jones.
Maybe Nick Bosa. I mean, you're already getting up into that kind of 8 range. I think I would be a little surprised if they went back to the kind of 3 or 4 captains model. I think it's probably going to be 6 or more this year.
I was going to say 6.5 as a line.
You've got so many. I mean, you've got some senior leaders, and you've also got some real impact players. And if you're setting Nick Bosa up as the example of here's the guy to watch to figure out how to practice, that sounds like someone who's going to end up being a captain. you're going to want someone in your offensive line, whether it's Isaiah Prince or Brady Taylor or Demetrius Knox or, whoever. I think someone on that offensive line is going to end up being a captain. So, I mean, you're ending up with, 4 captains on offense and probably 3 on defense. I mean, I think that's probably going to become the new normal. Maybe it's not 9, but it's not going to be 3 either.
Yeah, and I think it just also depends on maybe the baseline is 6, and then you go from there. And sometimes it's going to be 9 because you've got Billy Price and JT Barrett and Tyquan Lewis, all of these 5th-year seniors that have been around forever, have been multiple-year starters, and those are captain types. I could see 7 pretty easily. What's next?
All right.
Bixby again.
This is from Silver Bear. How are we set for special teams, especially regarding completing both punts and field goals?
We got to talk to Drew Chrisman and Liam McCullough, the long snapper, Drew Chrisman, the punter. Tom, you talked to Drew. I talked to Liam McCullough. McCullough was saying everybody's kicking really well right now. Sean Neurenberger is doing all of the placements. Blake Hallbell is doing all of the kickoffs. And they're both really accurate right now. And I think Ohio State having 2 scholarship kickers, and they're not, Blake go. They're not trying to have those 2 compete. They want Blake Hallbell to be automatic kicking to the 5-yard line inside the numbers. They want Sean Neurenberger to be automatic from 45 yards and in, and they're not making them worry about. They're only worried on their thing. So Liam McCullough said they're really excelling at that. We know McCullough is fine as a snapper. What did Drew Chrisman have to say about the whole punting situation?
He basically said they were 9th in the country in net punting last year. So, I mean, that's pretty good. That's not really a source of concern. But, he said you can always get better, which, obviously is the goal. It was the most interesting thing that I thought I heard from him was someone asked about, are they treating it kind of as a kicking competition with Blake and Sean for that, field goals and PATs job? And it was kind of like, no, they're just kind of doing, they're doing what they're doing, and it's not, it's not like someone's trying to win that job for the field goal job. That's kind of interesting to me because, I mean, everything else on this team is treated as a competition, or at least given the veneer of being an open competition. And for this not to be is kind of interesting to me. But, I mean, Neurenberger was really good last year. He's perfect on PATs in his career, 177 for 177, which is, pretty good. And 17 to 21 of field goals last year. 2 of the misses were in that Maryland game where just the whole special teams was just a tire fire all day. So outside of that, he was 0 for 2 that game. Outside of that, he's 17 for 19 on field goals last year. So he missed 1 against Michigan and 1 against Wisconsin, I think, were the 2 misses. But, that's a position of strength. There's positions that I think are a little bit up in the air this year and places that you could be concerned about. I would not be super concerned about special teams. That seems, especially the kicking game, seems pretty well settled at this point with established guys who have shown that they can play at the level that they need to play to be at Ohio State.
It's like Hallbell and Neurenberger. They just consider them playing separate positions this year because it's like wide receiver and tight end. They do similar things, but it's not the same position. So the kickoff guy and the field goal kicker they're completely separate this year because I don't always think a kicking competition is a good thing for any kicker because those guys can sometimes be head cases. Think back to 2016, 2015. Sean had some injuries, but he wasn't he also had some kicking issues because he couldn't get his job back or whatever, or when he started kicking better, I think at the end of 2016, maybe it's because the kicker they had at the time wasn't doing as well. You think back to 2001, Josh Houston and Mike Nugent. I mean, those are the two worst kickers I've ever seen, and then they both turn into really good kickers. I don't think a competition is sort of the best way to get the best out of your kicker. I think having them know their roles and yes, this is your job, and Blake, this is your job. I think that'll help things.
Is your assumption that after Nurnberger graduates, that it is just they don't continue on that model? That next year it's Blake Hallball doing both. I mean that's sort of what I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, unless they have a walk-on who can kick kickoffs. Yeah, but I would expect at that point that it would be Blake, and it should have been Blake this year, except Nurnberger redshirted. So yeah, I would expect Blake to take over, unless. Rarely do they like one guy doing all of that, unless maybe they just haven't had the guy who could. Maybe Blake will be that guy next year.
All right, this one's from Purgatory Buck. Is there a timeline deadline on graduate transfers of when we expect to hear by for men's basketball?
Tom, I don't know if you looked at some timelines. I assume you did, but what I've seen is it's summertime. Basically, these guys have to transfer, and if they're going to enroll in summer classes, they have to get into school by the start of those summer classes. If not, they have to be enrolled by the time fall semester starts, which is August, September. So when looking at past transfers, they would announce their transfer from any time after the season, basically. Andrew Dockich transferred in
July 17th.
July
17th, yeah.
Spike Albrecht announced his transfer immediately after the season almost. So anytime between now and July, August, it could happen. They could be signing guys at that point. So I don't know that there's any really dead drop date on graduate transfer time. Did you see anything like that? I didn't.
No, I think you just have to be enrolled at the start of the fall semester, basically, which for Ohio State, I think it was August 21st. It's something like that. If whatever the first day of fall classes at Ohio State is, if you search the student directory and you don't see that player's name, they're probably not grad transferring to Ohio State. But yeah, you could hear something next week, or you could hear something in July, or you could hear something in August, and it's all. I don't think there's a absolute hard and fast drop dead date on it. They have to be enrolled and they have to be students in the fall in order to play for the team in the fall. That's it.
And Ohio State has a summer semester, which is a shrunken semester. I don't know. I don't even know if they do grad stuff at that point, but the enrollment for that I believe is early June, late May. Yeah, you could hear something tomorrow or after the 4th of July. We'll see.
All right, this one's from Schadenfreude. Arnett or Okua, or Okudua, I can't even pronounce his name now.
You're going to have to.
And how is Sean Wade progressing?
Arnett or Okuda? I mean, it's both. It's Damon Arnett, it's Kendall Sheffield, and it's Jeff Okuda. Those are the starting three quarterbacks, unless you disagree, Tom. And then we'll see if a fourth guy can come in who, Sean Wade. We talked to the cornerbacks. Do we do it this week or is it next week? I already forgot.
We talked to Taver Johnson this week, I think. So I think we should be talking to the corners.
Yeah,
which means we have by the time you're listening to this, but through the vagaries of podcasting, we haven't done it yet.
Yeah, so I would expect Sean Wade to continue the same trajectory that he had early on and in the offseason, which was really good. But it's not an either or, in my opinion, Tom. It's not either Arnett or Okuda. It's both. And then we'll see if Sean Wade can be the fourth, right? Wrong?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think you're going to have I think it's going to start with Arnett and Sheffield as your top two and Okuda as your third, and it's entirely possible that Okuda jumps one of those guys at some point this year. My assumption is one of those guys is going to make a huge leap this year and be kind of the next first-round draft pick. I don't know which one it is, but one of them will, and there's a decent possibility Okuda jumps the other one and becomes that sort of second corner as opposed to the third corner. But you're playing so many teams that are going to run, spread and try and run, have 3 receivers out there, 4 receivers out there. You're going to play a lot of nickel anyway, so Okuda is going to be out there a decent amount. As far as Wade, yeah, I mean, we have gotten extremely limited looks at practice right now, and I think that both Gerd and I have come away impressed with Wade, and we've actually made a point to kind of try and watch him at times just because he came in so highly touted and then, was just suffered that abdominal injury last year and missed the whole year. From the little bit that we've seen, I've been very impressed with him. I think he's poised to be someone who is, if Arnett and Sheffield both go after this year, I think there's a decent possibility it's Okuda and Wade as your top 2 corners next year. And then, someone I'm really interested to watch is, Tyreek Johnson and Sevyn Banks. I'm interested to see them in the spring game this year when we can get a better look at them and sort of see what they have. Because I don't think you're going to get a whole heck of a lot out of them this year. Okuda was about the best case scenario for a true freshman corner. And he, even in the Cotton Bowl at the very end of the year, he looked okay. He didn't play great. He gave up some long passes, but just by looking just okay, that's a really good sign for the future. If you can just do that, just basically keep your head above water as a true freshman, that's a pretty good sign. So I'll be interested to see what we see out of Tyreek Johnson and Sevyn Banks, this spring and then again this fall, because I think you have the potential for multiple real impact corners in that group between Okuda, Wade, Banks, Johnson, and some of the other guys on the roster too.
And like Johnson said on signing day, he believes that he and Sevyn Banks are the future of the position. And you mentioned the spring game. I remember last year, it was Jeff Okuda and Shaun Wade as freshmen who, in that spring game, had some ups and downs, but both made plays at the end on like they broke up passes in the red zone at the end. I think Shaun Wade had a broken up pass in the end zone to maybe secure the game. And now we'll see Sevyn Banks and Tyreek Johnson maybe do that same thing this year. And would seem to be that that's maybe the right way to start your career as an Ohio State cornerback. Oh, what's next, Shannon? Who's this guy?
All right, we're going to talk about basketball now, so Kyle can just fast forward through this. This is from No Huddle Scouts. When Joe Burrow is named starter, will Haskins stay? Like we talked about this at one point in time.
Yeah, and I think, Tom, both you and I agree that Dwayne Haskins wouldn't transfer because he doesn't have that grad year. He would have to sit out a year, and Joe Burrow could be off to the NFL after next year, and there's too many unknowns for him to just up and transfer. Are you still on that same page?
I am still on that same page, and I just wanted to say to Kyle, thank you for listening to last week's show.
I know, it was just last week, and the only thing we talked about basketball last week was Caleb HD out declaring. That was it.
You already lost him. He's gone. Sorry, Kyle.
Peace. All right, this one's from, I guess he's been reinstated, Chip Minnick. Which player are you surprised has not been mentioned more by Urban Meyer this spring? Hey, look, another question that was answered.
Well, and
he didn't know that. He didn't know that.
And I told him on Twitter that I actually had already something like this in the rundown, but I'm trying to bring him back into the fold and out of banishment. But I'm going to go back to.
Well, Tom's the one that banished him.
Tom, is it okay if we answer this question?
He hasn't retweeted any parody accounts for a few weeks that I've seen, so I think he's back in my good graces for now. But you better watch yourself, Minnick.
I'm going with Rashad Berry. I think he's supposed to be the starter at the position. We need to hear something about him. Where are you at, Tom?
That's exactly who I had listed. I came in fully expecting, this spring for him to sort of seize that job, and it, from all accounts, hasn't really happened. And, maybe that's a function of the fact that we haven't talked to the tight ends yet, right? No, we haven't.
Well,
So
we were
that's, I mean,
supposed to,
maybe,
but
maybe
none
it's
of them came out.
What's that?
We were supposed to when we talked to Kevin Wilson, but none of them came out.
That's right.
And
yeah. So we
I don't even know if
haven't
Kevin-
talked to the tight end. So that's sort of can kind of color that, but he's not someone that Urban has brought up, and he is someone that I came into the spring expecting to sort of seize that job, and it hasn't happened, which is just, it's a little odd to me. And then he specifically mentioned Luke Farrell last week, or this week, sorry, as someone who has kind of made a leap. So, you go from expecting him to be a potential impact player to maybe he's not even the starting tight end this year.
Didn't he give Luke Farrell he graded a champion on a scrimmage, didn't he, said?
I think that was right. He either said he graded out a champion or that he had, was someone who had really stood out in some way. So, I mean, it was very, very clear that he was impressed with him. He didn't list 37 players when he went through that list. It was like there were, I don't know, 5 or 6 guys maybe, and Farrell was one of them.
Tom, did anybody even ask Kevin Wilson about the tight ends?
I don't think so.
I don't remember.
I'd have to go back through the transcript again. I don't remember seeing anything, which, I mean, is just sort of indicative of people that have been on the Ohio State beat long enough to know that, I mean, you can ask about the tight ends, but we all know what's going to happen this fall. So
we're going to use them more this year.
That's also the problem with having
this is the year the Great Pumpkin shows up, Gerd. It's going to happen.
That's also the problem with having the offensive coordinator coach the tight ends the same year that you've got another offensive coordinator and you've got new quarterbacks, and the tight ends sort of get forgotten. Our apologies. Yeah, Luke Farrell did grade out a champion. I just checked the transcript. So that's a good sign for Luke. Maybe not such a great sign for Rashad Berry, which sort of goes into the next question. Shannon?
This one's from @Matthew_Elkins. If depth is needed at defensive end at some point, could we see Mr. Berry moonlight on both sides of the ball situationally? I was going to say simultaneously. Yeah.
That'd
be impressive.
I don't see it happening simply because they've got 3 they like. They've got a 4th they think they like in Jayshon Cornell. Then they're going to add some guys in the fall. And I don't, if Rashad Berry is not consistent enough on offense, he's not going to become more consistent by also spending time on defense. Like we talked about the kickers with Blake Hallbill just focusing on kickoffs, Sean Nurnberger just focusing on field goals. They'll want Rashad Berry just focusing on tight end. Tom, you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a window for that to happen, for them to move him over. But when they moved Cornell over, now you've got 4. Now you've got more guys coming in the fall. You've got a good rotation there already. So unless you have multiple injuries, I mean, maybe they move him there. We've talked about him. We've talked about Dante Booker as potentially being someone that could provide some depth at defensive end. I think at this point, if those guys haven't moved yet, and they haven't talked about moving those guys yet, you're probably not going to see it, barring some kind of a pretty significant, some kind of real significant loss to injury from that unit. Which hopefully you don't run into that.
And I think if he gets some time in defensive end, his days at tight end are over, because they'd be moving him because they've finally decided that he can't do what we need him to do at tight end. I've seen what he can do at tight end. He can do stuff. So just leave him there, let him be, and let him get consistent. Oh, what's this final question there, Shannon?
Some guy named Tony Gerdeman. What's your biggest parking lot pet peeve?
Now, I've got a lot. So narrowing this down to one from my list of 74 was difficult. I saw on Twitter this past week somebody parked in the parking lot and parked over. They basically used 2 spots. So what another person did was they took a shopping cart and zip tied that shopping cart to the driver's side door handle. And it's just the most rewarding, heartfelt picture I've ever seen. It's like this and maybe like a newborn baby. It just makes your heart so full of joy. And I don't think, trust me, I hate people who take up 2 spots. But I think my bigger pet peeve is people who drive through the parking lot like it's a street. Like the white lines don't matter. They'll just drive through the parking lot because they don't want to, drive like you're supposed to and go down one aisle. And then, then now that you're at the front of the store, now you got to go back down another aisle. I used to, like my morning routine I had where I would have like 20 minutes before I had to be anywhere. So I would sit in the parking lot at Kroger. And every day this dude would come from one end of the parking lot and it's 8 a.m, so nobody's in there. And he would just, 30 miles an hour through the parking lot, all across these white lines. And so then I started parking like right in his way. So he would have to obey the parking lot laws. And he would get really angry with me. But I think that's my biggest parking lot pet peeve is simply, now I'm not saying you always have to do this. Like you should always obey the laws because you don't always need to, but don't treat it like it's your side street. Now, what do you got, Tom?
Well, I was going to say parking lot vigilantes, but now that might make this a little bit uncomfortable. So, no, I'm just kidding. I am absolutely a taking up multiple spots person. Like, if you do that, you should just be sent to prison. That's just so stupid and selfish. And either you don't care and you're, it's the guy with the real fancy car who parks across like 4 spaces because he doesn't want anyone to get too close to his precious baby. Like that's the guy that just, if you saw that guy with a flat tire, I'm not a let the air out of someone's tire person, but if you saw that guy with a flat tire, you'd probably laugh a little bit. That's the worst. But the people who just park and straddle the lines, or just pull into a spot and just your tires over the line. And it's like, oh, well, I'm only taking up like 3% of that other parking spot. Well, no one can park there because you're a jerk. So stop being a jerk. Learn to park. If you think you might be close to the line, look before you get out of the car. Like you can open your car door and look at where your car is relative to the line. Take 3 seconds to do that. And then after you get out of your car, look again and just see, hey, am I parked in 2 different parking spots? Is this actually enough space for someone to park? Like, you don't need to be able to park like the Canyonero in the spot next to you, but can someone with a reasonable sized car park in the spot next to me? And without, and if they open their door, are they going to, ding my door? Are they going to have to slither out the window, Dukes of Hazzard style? Like, how is it? Have you left a reasonable amount of space? And if you have, great. And if you haven't, get in your car and fix it.
Those really are the worst people. They're the worst people because they view themselves as more important than everybody else. I think you should be legally allowed to do something to their car, not damage it, but like a zip tie, that should be perfectly acceptable. Toothpaste under the door handle, perfectly acceptable.
Banana in the tailpipe, always a classic.
Ding their car with your door.
No damage, but like they
don't have the courtesy. No, I mean that's one of my biggest pet peeves is people that can't park in the center of the parking lane. I'm with you guys with the idiots with the 2 spots, but what is so hard about getting your vehicle in between the 2 white lines? If you get out of your car and you see you're way over on the one side and you're going to cause somebody else an issue getting in and out, if you're not going to leave them a can opener in order to be able to get into their vehicle, just get back in your car and just scooch it over, reposition it, have a little common courtesy for your fellow humans, because I have a truck and I'm going to hit your car with my car door. And then when you come running and yelling at me, I'm going to say, hey, this is your problem. Now, if you park in the middle, I will take every precaution not to even touch your car with my the truck door, because that's courtesy.
I see I've touched the nerve with Shannon.
That's my biggest pet peeve. It's 2 white lines. He's parking in the center of it, not diagonal in it, not to the right, not to the left, right in the center.
I like when
I'm picturing Shannon like on the roof of like a Walmart or a Kroger or something with like a mask, like ready to swoop down like a superhero. Someone has parked illegally across 2 lines. swoop down.
I only care about it when they're parked next to me. Like if I go into the store and I've many of times I've gotten out of my vehicle, I'm like, oh, I'm way too far on that side. I will get out and I'll get back in my truck and I will move it. It's only right because I don't want somebody sitting there taking their door handle. I mean, 9 times out of 10, they don't care anyways, but it's just, it's a pet peeve of mine. So I don't want to do it to other people, treat those how you want to be treated. But then you come out, you got some idiot who there's 15 feet between their vehicle and the one in the next lane, but yet there's like 2 centimeters between my truck and their car. And it's like, oh, you want to play that game? Cool. Not a problem. Sorry about the dent. It's your fault.
And as we all know, the golden rule of parking lots, it's park next to how you would want to be parked next to.
Exactly.
All right. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. That's been enough podcasting for tonight.
Yeah, that was a good hour.
It sure was. The last 30 minutes wasn't so great, but thanks everybody for listening. If you want to go ahead and give us rate us, review us on iTunes, that is always helpful. Make sure to subscribe to our network, the Ozone Radio Network. You can do that on iTunes or whatever platform you listen on, I assume. Make sure you check out the rest of the shows this week, all week, next week. And gosh, by the time you listen to this, we will be almost like 1 week away from spring football. And then once spring football is done, this show is going to get a lot more difficult. But we'll get it figured out. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
We could steal a car and leave.